Have you ever stood in awe of a massive structure and wondered, who thought of building this? And why? Get ready to dive into the world of megaprojects that, despite all their pomp and astronomical expenses, ended up as massive white elephants, a journey through empty hotels and ghost towns that now resemble post-apocalyptic settings. Our first stop is in Pyongyang, where the Ryugyong Hotel dominates the skyline with its pointed pyramid silhouette. Started in 1987, it was born from the North Korean government's desire to compete in grandeur with the West. Standing at 1,080 feet tall with 105 floors, the Hotel of Doom consumed around $750 million, with total estimated costs reaching $2 billion. Construction faced a 16-year interruption due to lack of resources and structural problems, worsened by the post-Cold War economic collapse. Today, the Ryugyong is a bizarre landmark. It looks complete from the outside, but its interior remains empty. Local guides rarely mention it, an attempt to hide the country's most colossal white elephant. From Korea, we travel to the coast of Nagasaki, where Hashima Island, also known as Battleship Island for its peculiar shape, is located. During its heyday, it was a symbol of post-Meiji Japanese growth. This city island once had the highest population density on the planet, with buildings, factories, and schools squeezed into just 16 acres. The purpose? To extract coal non-stop, accommodating workers and their families in concrete buildings. With coal being replaced by oil in the 1970s, the island was abandoned in 1974. Residents left overnight, leaving behind furniture and personal belongings. Today, Hashima is a limited tourist attraction and gained fame in cinema, serving as a setting for 007 Skyfall. In the former Soviet Union, scientists created the largest Marx-type electric generator for high-voltage testing, an almost cinematic scenario amid forests. Standing at 129 feet tall, it could emit discharges reaching 492 feet. The investment was billions of rubles to test protection systems and develop advanced military technologies. Tragedy struck in 1985 when the dome collapsed before completion. With the deepening Soviet crisis, the project was abandoned. Today, remnants of the equipment form a veritable technological cemetery, with piles of twisted metal that once symbolized scientific pioneering. If you dream of living in a Disney-Eid Tarain castle, you might have liked Burj Al Babas in northwestern Turkey. This complex from the 2010s planned 1732 standardized mini-castles with fairy tale towers and domes. The $200 million investment aimed to attract Middle Eastern millionaires looking for European-style vacation homes. However, the Turkish economic crisis and the developer's bankruptcy halted construction. The result? A ghost town of castles, with identical empty structures, resembling a dystopian movie set. Some pictures online show this strange sight. Hundreds of castles without power or water. A monument to real estate megalomania. We move on to a project in development, The Line, part of the futuristic city of Neom. The proposal? A 106-mile linear city, with walls 1,640 feet high, budgeted at more than $1 trillion. The idea is to house 9 million people in a sustainable model. No cars, no CO2 emissions, clean energy, and AI systems. The propaganda talks about a new standard of community living. Although construction has begun, The Line faces criticism about economic viability and environmental impact. Many question whether this concentration in a narrow corridor would bring supply and logistics problems. Time and investors' pockets will tell if we'll see this colossal wall in the desert. On Malaysia's southern coast, near Singapore, Forest City consists of 4 artificial islands, planned as an eco-futuristic city with vegetation-covered skyscrapers. Budgeted at $100 billion, It envisioned infrastructure for 700,000 residents. The promise? A sustainable urban hub with green architecture and premium services to attract foreigners. Only 15% of the project was completed, with an actual occupation of just a few hundred people. The isolated location, political instability, and more restrictive immigration policies contributed to its failure. There are even reports of crocodiles in nearby mangroves. Not exactly an attraction for buyers. The new Quito International Airport was built to replace the old Central Terminal, which had safety issues due to the mountainous topography. With 8 million square feet, it was designed for 25 million annual passengers at a cost of billions of dollars. The goal was to attract more airlines and make it a continental hub. Despite its inauguration in 2016, it faced lower than expected demand. The high operational cost and distant location didn't help. During certain periods, you can walk through the halls without seeing the crowds promised in the initial designs. We return to the Soviet period for a gigantic dam in the Caspian Mountains, started in 1979. The project mobilized armies of workers to create a structure with a capacity for 200 million cubic meters of water. The terrain, however, was extremely unstable. There were landslides and geological problems underestimated by engineers. With the Soviet collapse in the 1990s, the project was left half-finished. Today, pieces of concrete blend with the rocky landscape, and nature has reclaimed the area. A monument to failure of the Soviet era of mega-engineering. In 2005, Myanmar's military government decided to build a new capital in the middle of nowhere. For reasons that still generate speculation, military, astrological, or political, they invested $4 billion in an area of 1,853 square miles. The result is avenues with 20 lanes and almost no cars. Naypyidaw is practically deserted, with underutilized areas and government buildings operating at minimum capacity. Some tourists describe the city as a video game scenario before inserting the characters. Officially, the government says the city will grow over time, but after almost 2 decades, this hasn't happened. In Benidorm, on the Spanish coast, the In-Tempo skyscraper was launched in 2007, at the height of the real estate market. At 650 feet and 47 floors, it aimed to be Europe's tallest residential tower. The estimated cost was 90 million euros, with promises of luxury apartments and panoramic sea views. However, the 2008 crisis burst the Spanish real estate bubble. Today, the building is nominally complete, but carries the reputation of a monument to pre-crisis greed. Many residents see it as an alien clashing with the landscape. This railway megaproject aims to transform Stuttgart Station into an underground structure. Announced in 1994, it had an initial cost of $2 billion, but shot up to $11 billion. Protests questioned the need for the work, its high cost and environmental impact. The current forecast is that it will be completed after 2025, becoming an emblematic case of how large public works can consume resources without guarantees of functionality. The Kingdom Tower aimed to dethrone Burj Khalifa as the world's tallest building. Started in 2013, it aimed to reach 3,280 feet in height, with a 7-star hotel and luxury apartments. Work progressed to the 50th floor when financial and political problems froze the project in 2017. The unfinished skeleton remains as a reminder that grandeur without planning tends to go wrong. Inaugurated in 1991, this structure on the banks of the Mississippi imitates Egyptian pyramids in a modern style. At 321 feet and costing $65 million, it was an arena for concerts and basketball games. Structural problems and the departure of the Memphis Grizzlies team after 13 years left the place without its main tenant. Today, curiously, it has been converted into a megastore for fishing and hunting gear with an internal hotel. An example of how a failed mega project can find new life. This cable-stayed bridge that crosses the Tarn River Valley is celebrated. As an engineering marvel, but its use hasn't met expectations. Inaugurated in 2004, it cost 400 million euros. At 1.5 miles long and with pylons 1,125 feet tall, it's the world's highest bridge. However, the high toll, more than 15 euros round trip, makes many drivers opt for the old road. Still, the viaduct attracts tourists who go just to admire and photograph it, partially fulfilling its function of relieving traffic during peak periods. This artificial archipelago reproduces the world map in about 300 individual islands. Launched in the 2000s, it cost approximately $14 billion. The expectation was to sell each island to tycoons and investors, creating exclusive developments inspired by different countries. But almost no island was developed. The costs to make each piece of sand habitable were extremely high. The 2008 crisis reduced interest, and erosion reports emerged. The world remains largely empty. An example of ostentation without a solid foundation. Imagine an underwater highway that would also serve as an artificial reef to promote marine life. Denmark dreamed big with this submarine tunnel that would save kilometers of travel while being an example of green infrastructure. Budgeted at $8.5 billion, the project promised to reconcile modern engineering and environmental conservation. But technical challenges and fear of unpredictable environmental impacts weighed more heavily. Environmental organizations protested against pollution risks and ecosystem disturbance, and the government ended up shelving everything. Not a single meter of the tunnel was built, an innovative idea that remained only on paper. Perhaps the most emblematic examples of giant unused works are the numerous ghost cities scattered throughout China. Kangbashi in Ordos is just one among dozens. During the economic boom of the 2000s and 2010s, municipalities received incentives to build entire urban districts, anticipating rural-urban migration and feeding real estate speculation. The result? An estimated 65 million empty homes across the country. Skyscrapers, wide avenues, shopping centers, stadiums, all practically deserted. The pace of construction far exceeded migration, with locations distant from employment centers and inflated prices. Today, these cities of the future remain as major failures of urban planning. Proposed by Elon Musk in 2013, the Hyperloop promised to revolutionize transportation with capsules traveling at 745 miles per hour in vacuum tubes. Los Angeles to San Francisco in half an hour? That was the promise. Pilot projects emerged in the US, UAE, and Europe, but no commercial-scale system materialized. The astronomical cost of building the tubes, combined with the challenges of maintaining a vacuum over long stretches and ensuring safety against failures, proved more complex than anticipated. Startups closed their doors, and investors lost enthusiasm. For now, the Hyperloop remains more science fiction than transportation revolution. To protect wildlife in regions crossed by highways, Russia built several green bridges for the safe movement of animals, mainly in forest zones. With an investment of about $50 million, each structure simulated the natural habitat, with vegetation and monitoring cameras. The problem? Many were built where wildlife flow is almost non-existent. Additionally, stray dogs and pedestrians began using the passages, further driving wildlife away. Lack of maintenance completed the picture. The well-intentioned project became the target of jokes for the choice of locations and modest results. In China's Chongqing province, Qianlong, Mountain received a 3-level spiral highway, a masterpiece of recent engineering. Completed in 2019, it cost about $850 million to create a road with 1,148 feet of elevation that gradually rises without dangerous inclines. The highway is seen as a technical success, but critics call it unnecessary over-engineering, arguing that a tunnel would be cheaper. It has become an internet attraction, with videos of drivers navigating the turns. It's not quite a failure, but it raises questions about cost-effectiveness. Dubai dreamed of another height record. The Nakheel Tower, initially called Al Burj, planned to be between 3,937 and 5,249 feet tall. The contractor, Nakheel, responsible for the famous artificial islands, launched the idea at the height of the real estate boom in the 2000s. With estimated costs of $38 billion, it would be a vertical city with hotels, luxury residences, and offices. The 2008 crisis hit Dubai hard, and Nakheel faced serious financial problems. The tower never went beyond the foundations, which were abandoned. Another symbol of the madness of pre-crisis real estate speculation. Unlike other projects, Palm Jumeirah, an artificial island in the shape of a palm tree, was built and sold. But not everything went as planned. Started in the 2000s, it cost $12 billion, used 94 million cubic meters of sand, and promised to be the tropical paradise of the Middle East. Over time, reports emerged of gradual sinking, coastal erosion, suffocating heat, and infrastructure problems. Failures in the sewage system and congestion at the only access point generate constant complaints. Palm Jumeirah still attracts tourists, but many buyers who dreamed of an earthly paradise found occasional flooding and overburdened infrastructure. In Bangkok stands the Sathorn Unique Tower, an abandoned 49-story building that has become a macabre landmark in the urban landscape. With 80% of the work completed, it has been imposing and unused since the late 1990s. Born before the Asian crisis of 1997, the tower was to be a luxury condominium with views of the Chao Phraya River. The crisis caused the builder's bankruptcy. Years later, legal disputes prevented resumption, and the structure deteriorated. It gained fame as a haunted tower, with reports of strange noises and apparitions. Despite occasional invasions by the curious, entry is officially prohibited. The 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, Russia, were the most expensive in history, with $50 billion invested in infrastructure built from scratch. Russia wanted to project power and modernity, creating ski complexes, stadiums, and redeveloping the waterfront. After the event, many facilities were left without regular use. Some spaces remain active on a smaller scale, but most suffer from abandonment. Maintenance is expensive, and the location doesn't attract regular competitions. Visitors report empty places, limited staff, and a sense of waste. Wonderland Park, 25 miles from Beijing, wanted to rival Disney. Started in the 1990s, it would occupy 120 acres with roller coasters, castles, and themed areas. The announced investment, hundreds of millions of dollars. Works were interrupted in 1998 due to financing problems and disputes with local farmers. The project was abandoned for 15 years, with semi-finished structures and rusty equipment. In 2013, it was finally demolished to make way for a new development. The Dream Park turned to dust before enchanting any visitors. In Dongguan, the new South China Mall was the world's largest mall in gross area, except the grandeur didn't bring in visitors. Opened in 2005, it had 7.1 million square feet and space for 2,350 stores, plus theme parks and replicas of monuments like the Eiffel Tower. Cost, $1.3 billion. Problems, remote location, lack of public transportation, and local average. Income much lower than projected. The result was a mall that spent more than a decade with 99% of stores empty. Ironically nicknamed the Great Mall of China, some corridors remained dark for years. The Walkie Talkie in London and the Vdara Hotel in Las Vegas share a curious problem. Their concave facades function as giant magnifying glasses. The London T.D. building melted parts of a car and caused damage to nearby shops, earning the nickname Walkie Scorchy. Meanwhile, the Vdara in Las Vegas creates a death ray in the pool area, with guests reporting mild burns. These examples show that something doesn't have to be gigantic to face expensive consequences. A miscalculation in curvature can transform facades into destructive lenses. Located 124 miles from Madrid, Ciudad Real Central Airport was one of Spain's first private airports. It cost €1 billion, had a 2.5-mile runway and spacious terminal, ready for large passenger flows. The problem? No airline was interested. The distance from Madrid and lack of public transportation made it unattractive. It accumulated debts of more than 300 million and went to auction for paltry sums. Today, it's remembered as a symbol of Spanish extravagance before the 2008 crisis. It temporarily served as an airplane parking lot during the pandemic. Sea Launch was a maritime platform for rocket launches in the Pacific near the equator. Initiated in the 1990s, it cost about $3.5 billion and involved companies from the US, Russia, and Ukraine. The equatorial location would allow for greater efficiency in satellite launches. However, geopolitical conflicts, mainly between Russia and Ukraine after 2014, and competition with companies like SpaceX, affected operations. After 36 launches and periods of inactivity, it was sold to a Russian company. The future is uncertain, but the promise of dominating the space market has been lost. The construction of this bridge in Kyiv dates back to the 1980s, still in the Soviet era. Designed to support cars and a metro line, it would cost about $500 million. Among the problems, lack of funds, frequent changes in the design, political instability, and engineering challenges. To this day, even with much of the structure erected, the bridge is not 100% ready. Entire sections are completed but unused because they are not connected to access roads. A monument to waste in Kyiv's landscape. Financial crises, demand overestimation, planning errors, excessive ambition, and political factors are the main culprits. There's an irony in seeing structures designed to last centuries abandoned before completion, while local communities are left without the promised benefits. What about you? Do you know of any construction in your city that started with pomp and never finished? Share your stories and opinions. Could these megaprojects have succeeded with more patience? Will megalomania continue to produce abandoned monuments in the future? It's possible that some of these places will gain new uses or be creatively repurposed. Until then, they serve as examples that, even with all the available technology, human ambition can still stumble on reality.